Model Making Guru is sponsored by emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs. emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Foxx from Model Making Guru here. Hello, and welcome to part 3 of our build of the HG Buster Gundam from Bandai. No airbrush allowed. No airbrushing at all in this kit. Now, if you remember in part 2, we finished off all the base colour painting. There's probably a few little bits I'll still paint later on, but I'm making those up as I go along. We've done all the base code painting, we put him together just to make sure everything fits. We learned that because I've painted the tube that goes down the middle of the arm, the top of the shoulder here where the arm is supposed to rotate is completely seized and a living nightmare. So yes, don't paint that tube that comes down from the shoulder part. There's your lesson. See, I do these things, I screw stuff up, so you don't have to. Now, where are we up to? This is where the weathering and all that needs to begin. That's what we're going to be doing in this episode. We need to do pin washing, we need to do chipping, we need to get the decals on, we need to do the weathering in general. We need to get more dry brushing once all that's done on these metals to make them look more metally, because that's just the base colour there and it's a bit flat and dull. So before we do any of that, before we do anything, the first thing that needs to go on is the decals. Always keep in mind, when you're putting a decal on a model, you're basically simulating something painted on the surface of the model. And I apologise if you can hear machinery outside. There's, instead of people mowing their lawns, there's DIY going on. It's like there's been non-stop DIY outside my house for like the last 3-4 months. It's ridiculous. Do these people have nothing better to do? Do they never finish their gardens? Anyway, yeah, so a water slide decal, which is what we're going to use, are supposed to simulate things painted on the surface of the Gundam. So they are going to get just as weathered as everything else. So it's important you do those first. If you do your weathering and then put a decal on, what you're saying is that somebody painted this on the side of the machine without cleaning it first, which makes no sense. So things like grime, dirt, dust, chipping, scratches, anything like that needs to go on top of the decals. It may not necessarily interact with them, but in some cases you might have paint chips that go over a decal, and that makes sense because it's just a layer of paint on another layer of paint. So the first thing we need to do is a gloss coat. This is all just bare paint. You must always gloss coat before you put a decal down, a water slide decal, because you want to have as smooth a surface as possible for that decal to go on. If you've got a rough surface like this, which is bare paint, or you've got a matte varnish surface, you're going to risk getting a crinkly decal and little air pockets underneath, and that's what causes silvering when you can see that sort of grey mist around the edge. It's called silvering. So you want the surface to be as smooth as possible, so we need to gloss varnish, and that's the first thing we're going to do. Now the plan for this video today is I'm going to kind of go Duncan style. I'm just going to try and rattle through all the different things we do as much as possible, just to get as much as I can in this video. I'd rather not do a 45-minute video with 3 things in it. I want to try and go through, and they're all fairly straightforward, so I'm not going to show you the entire me painting all the things. What I'll do is I'll say, here's the step, we're going to do this, here's how you do it, and then I'll go on to the next one. So it's going to be more of a compendium. I'm saying this now, there'll be 45 minutes of talking before we get that far, but never mind, never mind. So the first thing we need to do is Tegloss varnish. Now, of course, we're not going to use an airbrush. Normally, what we are going to use is my good old standby Pledge Floor Care Finish 2 times more shine. As always, Pledge Floor Care Finish, also known as Future or Clear or Pledge Multi-Surface Wax. Millions of different names it can have. I'll put a link in the description below to the page on Swanny's model, which is the universal resource for what that shit is called in your country, because it has a million different names and they change the name all the time. So the most recent up-to-date guide is on Swanny's model, so I'll put a link down below. Now normally I would just airbrush this stuff and it would give me a lovely glossy coat. We can't do that. So what we're going to do is do brushage, and for that I'm just going to need the pledge itself. I've got some decanted into a little dropper bottle and an brush. I have a brush specifically for doing pledge brushing. I've got a couple actually, and it's just a soft bristle brush with a nice sort of flumpy end, and it's nice and soft and flexible, and I want that because I want to minimise brush strokes. Now the advantage with this stuff is that it does self-level beautifully. If you brush this on carefully, you can get a nice smooth finish. Now you're not going to get the kind of gloss finish normally that you would get if you airbrushed it. You can do, but it's hit and miss. It's very finicky. When you put on an airbrush coat, you have to mist a coat over first and then build up thick layers. With brushing, it's just straight on. So the first coat looks kind of matte and makes everything go dark. So I've no idea how this will turn out. It may turn out terrible. It will turn out shiny and glossy, don't worry, but it may not be quite as glossy as it will be if you airbrushed it, but that's what we're going to have to live with because we're doing brushing only. So let me clear all this stuff away, and I'll very quickly show you a little bit of brushing, and then we'll move on to the next step. So, back in a moment. Okay, so we have a piece here that we want to gloss varnish, nice and flat. All I'm going to do is take my brush, I'm going to get some pledge on there. Now you don't want to overload the brush too much, so get some of the pledge off on the edge of the pot, and all you want to do is dead simple, just very slowly, very carefully brush it on. You can use a big brush if you want to, but I find these small brushes are fine because it's soft and floppy. It gives me a nice brush mark free texture. So don't go for a flat brush if you can avoid it, because they tend to be, although conversely it's the opposite with paint, they tend to give you kind of bristly marks. And all we're doing is very slowly putting on that layer, very carefully, very gently, and this is it. This is what we need to do over the whole model. Now what you might want to do is more than one coat, so you need to let this dry for about maybe half an hour, something like that, just to make sure it's nice and dry. It will self-level, so don't panic if it looks a bit lumpy when you put it on. Oops, knocking the camera. The other thing you may find is if you're brushing over an irregular surface, like say the missile launchers on the shoulders or anything like this bit here, you may find you get some little bubbles. Don't panic. They'll either go away on their own, or if you need to, you can just blow on them and they'll go away. And that is all we need to do. I think I've done all the edges now. Yep, that's all we need to do. So I need to leave that to dry for about, I mean, for the next coat, I'd give it an hour just to make sure. Once you're happy with the level of gloss, because this may dry a little bit matter because we brushed it on. So once you're happy with the level of gloss, you might need to do 2 or maybe 3 coats. Try and keep them thin. Once you've put on the last coat, you want to put this in some container where it's sealed from the air, well, sealed from the dust, and put it to one side for 24 hours before you do anything else. I put mine in a little plastic storage case, and then I just scooch the lid over a little bit so there's a little gap so air can get in and out and circulate, but dust can't necessarily get in. So just put them away in something that's not airtight and not sealed. It's got holes for air to go through, but it's covered from dust, because the thing is, this will pick up dust like a complete magnet. So that's all we need to do. So I'll go off and do the rest of the model, leave it to dry for 24 of the Earth hours, and then when we come back we can start with the decals and then the weathering. So I'm back in a moment. Okay, so the gloss varnishes are 24 hours to dry, and as you can see, everything is now nice and super shiny. Shiny. Now when you gloss varnish it, you will start to see all the little brush marks that you couldn't see before, like there. But don't panic. Don't panic. It's only because it's a gloss varnish, it's going to show up any brush marks or any irregularities in the surface even more. Once this has been weathered, matted down and given a coat of matte varnish, they'll tone down, they'll disappear quite a lot. It's just right now because it's shiny. You might go, the paint job now looks pants. Don't worry, that'll go away. But you can see it's all nice and shiny now and glossy and lovely. Even the metallics look a bit brighter now. You'll notice everything looks a little bit darker. Gloss varnishes do darken things a bit. But again, don't panic. Don't panic. So yeah, that's all looking nice and spanky now. And that's just ready for the next stage, which is the water slide decals. So I'm going to put that on now. You've seen me do this before, but for those that haven't, it's a 2-step process, 2 or 3 step. We're going to use 2 products, Micro Set and Micro Sol. I always get the names wrong, so I'll say red and blue. Blue is number 1. I know it's confusing, I marked the lids wrong. Blue is the first one we use, red is the second one. So you have to do this over a gloss coat to get the best results. That's why I've glossed this whole thing. What we do is we get a brush, Now I've got specific brushes for microsol and microset. We need a couple of pairs of tweezers as well. So what I'm going to do is first of all get in a position where I can see what I'm doing and you can see what I'm doing as well. Turn the decal over very carefully. So what we're going to do, if you've seen this before you'll know what's coming, we're not going to use any water at all. I've got really good results on small decals when I don't use water. I'm going to get some microset on the brush, and what we're going to do is basically, instead of water, we're just going to coat the back of the decal in microset, and this takes the place of water in separating the decal from the backing paper. So that should be enough. Just going to give it a second. It's quite hard for me to film this because I've got the camera right low down and I can't actually see what I'm doing. So we need to let this sit for a moment. And we need to just keep an eye on it. And after a few moments, hopefully, it should start to move freely. There we go. Be very gentle. Oops. You don't want to rip it. So here's how I do it. First of all, I drag the decal along a bit so I can grab some of the backing paper without the film. We want it to go here. I don't even know if it fits. I've not even tried that yet. So what we'll do is we'll take the decal. We will very carefully, if we can, I don't think these tweezers are going to work because they don't grip very well. Just grab them with the other tweezers. It's always quite stressful doing decals on film. If I can, I will grab the decal here. I'll get this hair off. Now I'll take my brush again with my microset as I continue to look at the camera, but it is really quite close to where I'm working. I'm going to coat the back of the decal in microset just to get it nice and moist. And then we're just going to place it where we want it and hope it fits. Oops. Now because I made sure the back of it was moist, it should move around a little bit reasonably easy. Now the other reason you put down a gloss coat before you do a decal is because it also protects your paint job from microset and microsol, which can be a little harsh sometimes. So I'm just going to line that up. Hope this is all coming out for you. Okay, so that looks like it's in about the right place. So what I want to do now is take a little more microset, not too much, and I just want to very, very gently pat it down, cover it over with microset. Now I'm going to try as best I can to just stick to the surface of the decal and try not to push it around. It may move a little bit. Sometimes if you touch it to the edge of the decal, the microset can go underneath. That's probably going to be enough. So I'll just make sure that's straight again because it moved. To quote Galileo, and yet it moves. So there we go, that's now on. So I'm going to leave that now to dry for 5 or 10 minutes. And then when that's dry, we'll do the next step. Now what you may notice is you may notice some cloudiness around the edge. That's fine, that will go away as we do the next few steps. You sometimes get that. Sometimes it can be that the microset has actually eaten away at your gloss coat. It's not impossible. And if it doesn't go away and you are left with that, you can weather that out later on with subsequent weathering. It might hide it, so don't panic too much. But more often than not, if you get a little bit of cloudiness, it will go away once all the microset and microsol dissolve, dry away and dissolve the clear film away. So I'm going to leave that for 5 minutes to dry. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. I've gone off and read some comments on the boom hut, and as you can see here from where it was a minute ago, it's looking a lot flatter now. Now it's all crinkly when we first left it. That's why you don't touch it. These things settle down, they expand and then contract back, and that's how these products work. They stretch and squish the decal, so it will go flat. Now you can still see a bit of the film around the edge, and it's still sticking up a little bit, and there's still a little bit of lumpiness and bumpiness. Not a problem. That's where our good friend bottle number two comes in. Microsol, the red one. Dead simple. Get your brush. As I say, I tend to have a separate brush for both products because they're different things. This one is kind of vinegary, and this one is kind of, I don't know, paint thinnery. So I try not to mix them up. I don't want to get one bottle with the other stuff in it. So I've got a specific brush, and all you do is get some of the micro sol, the red one, on your brush and just go over the decal. Now, like I said before, depending on what you use for your gloss coat, this stuff, if you put enough on like that, it leaps out your brush. If you put too much on, it can affect your gloss coat. It can eat into it. If you go whole hog and just slap it everywhere, if I slapped it everywhere and put tons and tons on, then yeah, it's probably going to eat into my gloss coat. And what I discovered was, if you're doing like a gunk wash, and this stuff does eat into your gloss coat, you'll get a noticeable mark, like a watermark. When you do the gloss coat, the gunk wash, you'll see it. So what I tend to do is brush some on, but just brush it on top of the decal. Don't spread it over the whole piece. Just try and restrict it to on top of the decal. Now what this will do, it will soften the decal on camera. It will soften the decal further. If this was an uneven surface, say I was trying to get it to go around an edge or up the side here, it would soften it and help it conform to the irregular surface. Say I was doing a decal across this step here. You know, I do it on camera. If I was doing a decal across that step there, or over this bit here, it would help it just stick to that and blend in and look more painted on. And what you might find is you might need to do 2, 3 or more applications of this. So basically brush a little bit on just over the decal, give it 5 or 10 minutes. As soon as it's dried out, if you need it to be even flatter, go and add some more. What it will basically do, I think, I understand this, is I think it very slightly eats away the clear film. And if you're careful and you do it step by step and check as you go, what you'll find is you can fade away or eat away the clear film just enough so that it's no longer got a visible edge, but you've not affected the actual print on this side of the film. So it eats the clear stuff away, but you don't let it go so far that it starts eating the actual printed part away. If you kept doing it over and over and over and over and over, eventually it would eat away through the clear film, and it would eat away at the printed part, and it would just get faded and become more and more transparent, and you just eventually it would just fade away. So we'll leave that for 5 minutes or so, let it dry. So I'll go off and keep an eye on that. Might do 2 or 3 different coats of the micro sol. Because it's a flat surface, it'll only need 1 or 2, maybe 3. If I was putting it over a ridge surface, it may probably need quite a lot more. So I'll go and do that, and when we come back, we'll do the next step. Okay, right, so the decals have all cured. They've had a couple of days to cure anyway. Now on to the next step. Now I did say in the last section I was going to use a gloss varnish over the top and protect the decals. I suddenly realised I don't need to do that, because what I'm about to use isn't going to affect the decals at all. As well, they've had several days anyway. But as you can see, I've not done many decals, just a few, just a couple here and there, little bits and bobs, nothing major. I didn't go to town on them like I normally do. I kind of did a few and thought that's enough, because it's only a small gunpla. What we're going to do now is go over with some shades. We're going to use Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. These will give it a matte finish anyway. However, we're not just going to brush these on neat, because that will just make this go brown. What we're going to do, we want to thin these down. We want to do a wash of these like I used to do in the old days when I used to use Tamiya Smoke as a wash. It would go into all the panel lines and darken them, very Starship Filth kind of way, and it would tint it ever so slightly, but it wouldn't really darken it or make it too brown. Now we can thin these with water, but it will change the way it behaves. It won't flow the same way. It will be thinner. It just won't be the same. So what we're going to do instead of water is use Lamian Medium. It's basically paint with no pigment in it. It means it will still behave the same way as it does normally, but it'll just be lighter and less intense. And this is dead easy. All we're going to do is we are going to get 2 brushes. One brush for the Lamian Medium. You never want to put a brush of paint on it in here. You want to keep this clean. So we're going to get the lid off the paint palette. Oh, I should have taken that off. So I've got my wet palette. I'll do this on camera. You can see I've done most of the parts already. I've kept a couple to one side. So we're going to get the Lamian Medium and give it a shake. We are going to get 5 blobs. What, if I can get them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do one extra just to be good. Put the excess back in the pot. And then I'll just rinse that brush off very quickly. Then we're going to take, in this case, we're going to do the cream part first. So we're going to take some Agrax Earthshade, give it a good shake. Shaky, shaky, shaky. Now I'm going to take my shade brush and I'm going to get 1 brushful. Apologies if it's a bit dark. Let's just mix that again. Ooh. Get one brush full. I'm going to mix that in. That's the wrong colour. That's Null Oil. You spoon. Oh well, we'll do this one first. So it's exactly the same for the Null Oil and the AIRBRUSH Earth Shade. So for this I'm going to do this on the orange parts and on the green parts because it's dark enough. So all we're going to do is take the part, get that out of the way, take the part, and I hope this is in focus. I've moved the camera again, and we're just quite simply going to brush it on, but we're going to be fairly careful. Do a bit more than that. We're going to be quite generous, but we're going to be fairly careful to make sure everything is covered and we're not getting any real obvious brush marks. Now this will flow, because we've used the Lamier medium, it will flow a bit less than it would if we did with water. With water it would just flow all down the model and everything would go all over the place. And that will be fine if that was the effect we wanted, but we want this to have a little bit of stickiness. So we're basically just adding some colour to clear paint. We're making our own wash. That's now on there. That'll take about, because it's gone on quite thick, it'll take about 10 or 15 minutes to dry. So I need to let that dry and then we'll do a second coat of that. So now what you need to do is keep an eye on it, because it will, if you put enough on, it will pool down towards the bottom. I'm not really doing it, I've done it thin enough now, but if you put loads on, it will pool towards the bottom. So you need to keep an eye on that. Unless that's the effect you want, you need to keep an eye on it. And if it starts to pool, just get a dry brush or brush with no paint on it and just suck it up with the brush just to get rid of any excess. So I'm just going to put that to one side, and we'll do exactly the same with the AIRBRUSH Earth Shade this time, you spoon. Here, mix in this paint. Oh wait, it's the wrong one. Yeah. And we're going to mix the AIRBRUSH Earth Shade in there. If anybody's used Tamiya Smoke and you've thinned it down for washes, this is exactly the same principle. The beauty of this is all water based, so if you're doing a Gunpla, it's not going to damage the plastic. You're not at any risk of damaging joints. So here you go with the cream part, exactly the same, but we're going to be a bit more careful now. So we're going to brush this on, and we're kind of brushing it on and dragging it around. Just move that out of the way, just so we can try and get some decent coverage. I'll try and make the brush go as far as possible, if I can. Okay, so you can see now I did 2 coats of the black and I did 2 coats of the AIRBRUSH Earth Shade, and you can see now you've got this kind of more dirty look to it. Now there are a few little patchy bits, but that's fine because we'll go over with some other bits later on. There's going to be dirt and dust and stone chips and some dry brushing, but you can see how it darkens everything down a bit and just makes it look a bit more used. So that's done. A couple of coats of that, a couple of coats of the Null Oil on there. What we're going to do next is the metallics, and for this we're just going to use straight Null Oil, because we are going to dry brush these back, so we don't mind if these go a bit dark. So we're just going to get some straight Null Oil, and this couldn't be easier. All we're going to do for this is quite simply brush the Null Oil on as it is. So nothing complicated about this one. This is just going all over the metallic parts. Try and be as careful as you can. You don't want to get it everywhere. Try and get a point on, that might be helpful. Could use a smaller brush, I suppose. Okay, so that's all had time to dry now, and as you can see it's come out quite nice. Looks a bit blotchy and patchy, but we'll figure that out in a moment. Just to run through what I did that I didn't see on camera, I finished all the metallic parts with 2 washes of the neat Null Oil, and I also did that the Null Oil wash on the greens and the oranges and the greys, so you can see they came out quite nice if I hold that on camera. Went to town on the head as well. That's all looking nice and dirty and grubby. Now in a couple of places I did also use neat Null Oil in a different way. Inside these thrusters, all I did was literally fill the brush with Null Oil and just touch it in, and it went and filled up and ran to the edges, and that's how you get those nice straight edges. I did the same on the back there. Again, just filled that with a couple of rounds of dropping Null Oil in, so it filled it up and then dries out, so you get that nice black square. I was going to paint those red. On the back I did exactly the same here, but not quite as much, so you can still see a hint of the red in there, but it gives a nice dirty sooty look. What else did I do? On the feet I used the thin Null Oil on the green, but then underneath I just used neat Null Oil under here because it's dirtier and darker because it's in contact with the floor. And inside the recess where the 2 thrusters are, again I just got some neat Null Oil, dropped it in let it fill, and then dry out, and did that a couple of times just to get it nice and black. So that comes out rather nice looking. On the arms, I did a little bit with the Agrax Earthshade, same principle again, fill the brush and just touch it to the recessed area and it fills it in, goes to the edge, so I did that there. And these little recesses here, I just got a very fine artificer brush with some neat Agrax Earthshade and just touched them in so it filled the line. So you got those little bits there. So as you can see, it looks really good. It looks a bit patchy though, so we need to sort that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and do some dry brushing. Yes, dry brushing. It's the thing I do all the time and you always see. So let me just get that ready. So we're going to take our small dry brush. Again, you don't have to use Citadel brushes for this. I'm just showing you the brushes I'm using in case you've got them. Take our small dry brush and we're going to go for the cream parts. We're going to go back to the Screaming Skull, which was the base coat, which will now be lighter because the Screaming Skull on the model is darker. That makes sense. So it's dead simple. We're going to take some of the Screaming Skull straight from the pot. Going to get a bit of the tissue, which will blow the white balance, and we're going to get it on there, work it into the bristles, as Duncan would say, and then brush a lot of it off. Now we want this to be really, really subtle. We don't want to get grainy patchiness and we don't want to get bits. So we want almost no paint on the brush at all. Okay, so what we're going to do is dead simple. We're just going to very, very lightly dry brush this, just to try and fade those patches. And what it should do is, where there are some tide marks, it should blend them away a little bit. And what we'll try and do as well is catch the edges. I was going to do an edge highlight, but if we use this small dry brush, this should have the same effect. Okay, right, that's all been done. All the dry brushing's finished, and as you can see, it just tidies things up a little bit, makes them look a little bit neater. Now, I did have some minor running repairs to do. The one thing about using the Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade is if you've got moving parts and you're putting it on, even if you do it as a thin wash, it can get a bit sort of gloopy and sticky. And I found that on this part here, where the side skirts move up and down, there'd been some wash under here between the two, and when I moved it, it made a big bleh across there like that, a splooge of the stuff. So it was all lumpy bumpy. So very quick to fix. All I did was I got my little sanding sponge, sanded it down so there was no lumpiness left. Most of the paint came off. Then I got my, which brush did I use? I got my base brush, my large base brush, and just very lightly painted the colour back in. I did the same on the inside of the skirts as well, and as you can see, it's perfect. Now there's just enough space in there for them to move without the paint coming off. What else did I repair? I also repaired here. A bit of the wash had got between this part and the green part, and it had been like that, so when I pulled it open, there was like a raised line of gunk where the wash had collected and dried. So same again, just sanded it down very gently and painted it back on. And that's the advantage of using a paint very similar to the colour of the plastic. If you do need to do a running repair like that, you can just sand it back and brush it back on. Yes, it's not got primer on there, but it's not the end of the world. So what's the next step? Next step, before we do any matte varnishings, is to put on some chipping. And what we're going to use for this, we're going to use a couple of colours. Now I've decided the first colour is going to be Rhinox Hide. It's a brown rusty colour. It's a dark brown colour. It's that colour. It's chocolate brown. Chocolate rain. No, I'm not going to do that. That's somebody else's copyright. I was debating whether to use that or Steel Legion Drab, which is more of an earthy tone. But I'm not going to use that. So that's on there. So we're going to do this first. This is going to be on the cream parts and the orange parts. For the green parts, you probably wouldn't see that. So for the green parts and the grey parts, what I may use is a lighter colour. Now it sometimes works this way. It's not realistic, but sometimes if you've got, say, a blue part and a white part, you might do a brown or grey chip on the white part because it stands out. You can't do white on white. If I did white chipping on there, you wouldn't see it. But on the dark part, sometimes you can contrast it with light chipping, and although it, like I say, it makes no sense because you've got different colour chips on the same vehicle, it just looks good. We're going to use the sponge. I've just got a chunk of sponge. It came with a watch. Actually, it was the packing from a watch. My mum got it for my birthday. It's a brilliant watch. I need to get a new strap for it because the strap fell apart. Ooh. So I forgot that. I've cut a piece off with the scissors, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to hassle it. I'm going to hassle this bit here. I'm going to drop it first, then I'm going to hassle it with these scissors just to rough it up and tough it up and make it nice and lumpy, bumpy. There we go. There you go, it's all fluffed. I'm a sponge fluffer, that's my official job. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a pair of tweezers, if I can find a pair of tweezers. And tweezers, we're going to, you can do this with your fingers, but I'm just going to get myself covered in paint. Now we're going to get some paint, and we're going to take it straight from the pot because of the reasons. Because just there's no point getting it out onto a palette and then doing all that. Oh, one other thing we'll need as well is some tissue. So I have a piece of white balance exploding tissue. So we're going to take our pièce de sponge, as the French wouldn't actually say. Make a little stub. We're going to get some paint on the sponge. Nice chunk of paint. Then what we'll do is we'll get a lot of that off on the tissue, because we don't need a lot. It's basically the same as dry brushing, you're just using a sponge instead. I like saying sponge. In reality I just say sponge, but it's nice if you overpronounce it, it says sponge. L'éponge, as the French would actually say. Now what we're going to do is we're going to suggest rusty dirty chipping, so dead simple. Take your piece and start to apply very, very gently. Just touch. Now nothing may show up at first, or it may do a big blob. If it does a big blob, you've just got too much paint on there. Just go off and take some more off. And what you want to do is kind of really focus along edges and places where rusting would happen. Now you want to try and keep it as random as you can. You don't want it to be too regular and uniform. Okay, right, all the chipping has been done, as you can see. It's looking pretty spanky. I'm quite pleased with that. Now, once that was done, I took it outside and gave it a matte varnish, coat of matte varnish. I used Humbrol acrylic varnish. It's Humbrol 49. I can't show you the cap because the camera's too low, but it's matte and it's 49. It's acrylic. They do an enamel one as well. Don't make the mistake of trying to put an enamel varnish over acrylic paints. It never ends well. So yeah, just so you know. So Humbrol 49, if you're in the UK and some other places, it's a really, really nice aerosol can, rattle can varnish. It's brilliant, but it needs to be a nice warm day outside and dry. So the next step is to do some dry brushing again, because we matted the metallics down, as you can see here. They're a bit drab looking, so we need to bring these back, and there's going to be 2 stages to this. I needed to wait till I'd done the matte coat before I did this, because there's no point doing this and then cover it in matte coat. So the first thing we're going to do is bring it back a little bit and lighten this metal up. And for that we're going to use Necron Compound, which is a dry paint, and what that means is it's basically 900% pigment and not much liquid, so there's no point shaking it. It doesn't move. It literally is stodge. And these are designed for dry brushing. So what we're going to do, same as before, get some on the brush. I'm taking some off on a tissue over off to the side. And then exactly the same as before, we're just going to go in and we're going to dry brush. Okay, now time for more dry brushing, more. This time what we're going to do is we're going to accentuate this metallic colour even more. Now we got it back from being dark and everything else to have this kind of mottled, slightly worn colour with the Necron Compound. Now we're going to go in. It's not a Citadel paint. It's Tamiya Chrome Silver. By far my favourite sort of silver metallic paint to dry brush, just because the effect it gives. Same as before, dry brushing. Load the brush. Get tons on. Get most of it off on the tissue. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see because the white balance, but that's so super shiny. And then all we're going to do is go back to our metallic areas, and we're just going to do exactly the same as we did before, but hopefully a bit lighter. But we're not going to go so much as we did before, but hopefully what this will do is just give us a little bit more ping on the edge of things. Alrighty, a couple more details to pick out before we do some dust and dirt. I've just remembered we need to do something with these thrusters. So what we've done is I've got some lead belcher here in the wet palette. And all we're going to do is take a tiny amount of water. It's too much. Tiny amount of water. Get some water in there. Remember, your wet palette should keep the paint moist enough, but Lead belcher can be quite grainy if it's a bit too thick. And what we're going to do is this. I've got my medium layer brush. I'm just going to paint around these. And we're doing the lead belcher first, because we're going to go over it again with something else in a moment. This is just like the base colour. Okay, right, last little bit of dry brushing, I think. I decided not to go over the lead belcher with anything else, because it kind of looks like quite a good colour as it is. But there's still something we need to do afterwards, but we'll come to that later. Now for the last little bit of dry brushing, we need to do some mud and dust. For that, we're going to use Steel Legion Drab. Steel Legion Drab. I actually went to the shop the other day and I got some of the Rhinox hide and the Steel Legion Drab to do some mud. But I don't need to use the Rhinox hide because I use that for the chipping and it looks alright. So we're just going to use the Steel Legion Drab. And I'll show you what to do on this foot. And yes, it is dry brushing. You knew it. You knew it's dry brushing. So we're going to get some on the brush. We're going to get lots of it off on the tissue, which I'm doing off camera, so it's not very exciting. There you go. Get loads of it off. And we're just going to suggest sort of dust and dirt that's gathered. And it's really just going to be around the bottom of the feet and the sort of ankles. And very lightly, we're just going to brush over the foot, thusly. I'm going to avoid the engines, the rocket motors, particularly because what I believe is when the thrusters kick in, they blow off any dust and dirt anyway. Okay, for the final step, we need two things: a graphite stick and a knife. All I'm doing, as you can see, is scraping off some graphite onto this piece of paper. And you'll see why in a moment. This is basically what you get in a pencil. So you can just use pencil lead, but you can, from art shops, you can get graphite sticks, which are just easier to work with. You'll get lots more and last years and years and years. Now, this is the fun bit. Okay, so here we have our foot. What we're going to do with this graphite, see why I had to put it off screen, is I'm going to get my finger and thumb, and I'm going to smudge the finger and thumb in there. And I do a bit of that. Really press it together. See how it goes shiny? There's a reason we want it to do that. Because all we're going to do now is basically rub this over the edges. You know how I was saying about bringing back the bling to some of the edges? This is how you can really bring back the bling. Not everywhere, and because we put mud on this, so it can't be clean everywhere. But what it'll do, if you rub it enough, basically all the particles get lined up and they start reflecting light much better. Okay, and having it on the twirly thing of happiness suggests that we are done. It's on the cheap twirly thing of happiness with the finger power, because we're not fully finished yet. We've still got the weapons to do. They're ready here. They've been glued and they're waiting for seam correction, and that'll be in the next episode. But with the mobile suit itself, it's done. Now, there's a couple of things I did off camera. I did paint the two lights on the front, or whatever the heck they are. Painted them ceramite white, and then did the dots in the middle with some spirit stone red, which is like it's a technical paint. It's like kind of, to me, a clear red, but a bit more viscous. That was just got my layer brush and just dotted them on till they were round. Bit of clean up as I went along. And I also got my Pledge floor care finish 2 times more shine. 2 times more shine. That went a bit wrong. Put that on the eyes and on the rear camera with a very fine brush. Just dotted it on a couple of times. Put it on, let it dry, put it on again. Just to bring the shine back to the cameras, because obviously once this was matte varnished, they got covered up. And that's not a major problem. You can just go over with the gloss varnish, just dot it on, and it'll sit there and it'll make a little bead and it'll be shiny. But that brings us to the end of this particular part of the build. The mobile suit is done. I'm turning him the wrong way. This seems wrong doing it this way. Final verdict on this part of the build. I'm going to be brutally honest with myself and you, my dear viewers. It's not my best ever work. I'm going to tell you that straight off. I'm admitting that. But I am quite pleased with it because it's the first time I've done brush painting to do a full paint job on a Gunpla. It's the first time I've brush painted a kit solely since I was about 13. And to that extent, it's come out really nicely. The Citadel paints, they give me a nice flat smooth surface. Not as smooth as airbrushing, that'll never happen. obviously, I've said that right from the start, but what's come out the other end is really nice. I'm really pleased with. I need a bit more practice using the paint's dry brush to make weathering effects. It came out quite nicely on the greens. You can see here I traditionally use pastels and powders and things like that, and I have done so for a long time. Again, the last time I did dry brush painting for weathering was, I was like 13, so. But it's come out quite nice here. You can see on this foot, it looks similar to it would do had I used powders and pastels and faded them out. So it's pretty good. Came out a bit more higgledy-piggledy on the legs. They came out a bit darker than I thought, but I'm happy with them. I'm only criticising it because I'm comparing it to what I'm usually doing, and I'm always criticising what I'm doing anyway. Good sign of a good model maker or painter or any kind of artist is that you're never happy with your own work. If I was to sit here and say,
this is the best thing ever painted and it's marvellous and I'm almost Jeremy Clarkson.
Don't know where I went with that. If somebody's sitting there saying, I've made this model and it's brilliant, I can never beat it, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not watching your stuff again. Because no artist worth their salt will ever think of their own work as brilliant. They'll always think, there's things I can see that aren't great. So yeah, it's not perfect. There's things I can see that I would do differently if I'd airbrushed it and painted it other ways and weathered it other ways. But it's fine. I'm pleased with it. It'll go nicely in my cabinet with the others. Now there's still more to do. We've still got the weapons to do. They are here. They've been glued. They just need sanding down and priming, and that'll be the last episode. The next episode, we'll go through that really quickly. But to wrap this up, I would say I've had great fun doing this. It's my first brush paint job completely in a long time, and it's my first Gunpla painted purely with brushwork. So I would say if you're looking at it, if either you haven't got an airbrush, you can't afford an airbrush, you don't want an airbrush, it's too scary, or you've got an airbrush, give brush painting a try. If you haven't got an airbrush, you can get brilliant results just brush painting, and if it's going to be a while before you get one, doesn't mean you can't make stuff. Give it a go. If you're a Gunpla builder or any kind of model builder, give it a whirl. As long as you use some good paints, you get some good brushes and you take your time. I found using a flat brush, like the base brush, my Citadel base brush, for putting down the base colours thinly, gave me the smoothest surface. So there are ways, and there are other paints. You don't have to go and use Citadel paints. They've given me a really nice finish. It's not 100% smooth, but I am led to believe, I've never used them, but things like the Vallejo Air paints can give you just as good a result, if not better. They have a wider range of colours, if I remember rightly. Again, I've never used them, so I've got like 3 in my collection and I've never used them. There's P3 paints, there's loads of other water-based acrylic paints out there. Whatever you can get hold of, give it a try. Just remember the 2 golden rules that Duncan always tells you. Thin your paints and use 2 thin coats. Or more thin coats, but use thin coats. Same principle as airbrushing. Don't just put all the paint on at once. That's how you get brush marks and stodge and lumps. But it's been great fun. So give it a try. If you're sitting there thinking, well, I see all these great models and I want to make them, but I haven't got an airbrush, doesn't matter. You can still make something cool. If you do have an airbrush and you're used to using it and you're happy to use it, give a bit of brush painting a try anyway. It's actually really good fun. It's a nice palette cleanser, and I like to think of it as if every time you do a picture, you do a massive oil painting on canvas, and it's really beautiful and complex, and it takes you months. Every now and then you want to sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper and just draw. And that's what I see this like. This is like, it's all the technical difficulties removed, it's all the complications, it's just brush, paint and plastic, and that's it. And it's just like a pure version. You can slap it on, you can be careful, you can get some great results. And don't just take my word for it. I would like to give a shout out to Lincoln Wright, whose channel is Paint on Plastic. I'll put the thing here, and I'll put a link in the description below. If you've never seen Lincoln's stuff, and apologies Lincoln if I got the channel name wrong. If you've never seen his stuff, he's a master at brush painting. He uses lacquer paints, or he has so far. He uses lacquer based paints, which do give you a wonderfully smooth surface, and he uses like a brush the size of a house. He's a bit like Bob Ross. He'll take a brush that's like this big and he'll go, now we'll put some paint on, and it just comes out perfect. And I'm like, I hate you completely. Dude, I don't know how you do that. I'm there like really carefully painting things, and he's like, yeah, paint, there you go, done. What? It's on, it's coloured, and it looks brilliant. He uses lacquer paints, and I've learned some things from his videos. So do go and check his stuff out. He's a really, really nice guy. He paints some marvellous things, and he does use lacquers. So that's another option if you're brush painting. You can use lacquer paints. They will give you a really, really nice smooth finish, but they are stinky and toxic. So obviously you need to work in a well ventilated room, but that's another option. But go and check his stuff out. I'll put the link in the description below. But yeah, I've had so much fun doing this that I am definitely going to be, when I do my Warhammer kits, when I eventually get the time, I'll be doing them as brush painted, I think. I might still go a bit more advanced on those with the weathering. I might get the airbrush out for those, but I'm doing this as an airbrush free build for those of you who can't use one. So yeah, but that's going to do it for this episode. Stay tuned for the last one, the next one, when we will do those weapons. It won't be a very long episode, but go off and try this. Go off and do something cool. Go off and be awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, a couple of quick announcements. A quick announcement. If you're not in the Boom Hut already, do go along to the Model Makers Boom Hut on Facebook. Address is here. We are underway now. Is the 2017 Egg Build Group Build Competition. Basically, the sticky post at the top of the Facebook page is the rules for the competition. It's basically an egg build, chibi build, super deformed build. Go and have a look. It's totally free to enter. It's totally free to become a member of the Boom Hut. It's just click that I want to join button and we'll say, yeah, okay. We let everybody in. And go and have fun. Everybody's posting up what they're building. There's a couple of months to go, so you've got ages yet. And there are prizes, although don't get hung up. They are, the best way to describe them is just silly and nonsense prizes. They're not monetary value. It's not a kit or anything like that. They're just silly prizes, but it's in keeping with the silliness of the build. So go and check it out. Facebook.com/groups/model boom hut. It's a brilliant group. Hang out on there. It's fantastic. Everybody has a great time on there. If you're a model maker and you've got a sense of humour, and one extra one, if you're an idiot, it does help. But if you're a model maker and you've got a sense of humour and you like to have fun and you like to help other people out, go there. That's what that group is for. We set that up exactly for that. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Go make something cool. Go be cool. I said cool and not awesome. I broke my own ending. Adios, amoebas.